I want to ask you something, and I want you to think about your honest answer here. When was the last time that you listened back to a recording of yourself playing and felt like the recording actually matched what you expected? For most pianists, the answer is almost never. The recording, it reveals something. The tone in a particular passage is thinner than it felt from the bench. The timing in a transition you thought was clean is actually slightly rushed. A phrase you've been working on for weeks has a shape issue that practice never caught. That's not a failure, it's information, and the question is whether you're using it. See, I talked in another video about the fluency illusion, the tendency to overestimate the quality of your playing while you're playing it, because the cognitive resources involved in executing aren't the same resources involved in evaluating those resources. See, recording resolves this in a specific way. When you listen back to a recording, you're not executing. Your full attention is available for evaluation, and you hear things that were completely invisible from the bench. This isn't uniquely a feature of the piano. It shows up actually in every domain where performance and self assessment happen simultaneously. Athletes use video review, surgeons video review footage of their procedures, speakers listen to recordings of their thoughts. The distance between performance and review is what makes that feedback useful. And for pianists, that mechanism is particularly important because so much of what we're trying to shape, like the tone quality, the timing, the phrase direction, balance between voices, it's actually perceptual. The benchmark is auditory, and you can't really fully assess auditory qualities while simultaneously producing them. Most pianists who record themselves do one of two things. Either they record a complete performance at the end of a practice session where they're tired, when the practice session is basically already over, and then they listen back emotionally rather than analytically. They hear the recording, they feel vaguely dissatisfied and vaguely pleased, and then they put the phone away or they record for social media, which introduces a completely different objective that has nothing to do with diagnostic feedback. Neither of these is recording as a practice tool. Recording as a practice tool means recording in the middle of a deliberate practice session on a specific passage, and then listening back with a very specific question in mind. Here's how I suggest doing this. Choose the passages you've been working on in that session, and before you begin working on it, record one uninterrupted playthrough of just the current state. Don't try to make it good, you're just establishing a baseline here. Listen back immediately with one specific question, not how does it sound overall, but something a little more concrete, like is the phrase arriving at the peak where I intended? Is the left hand audible in the right proportion to the right hand? Is the transition into bar 8 happening in time or is it slightly late? Make note of what you find and then practice the passage for 10 or 15 minutes as you normally would. At the end of the work block, record it again. Listen back with the same specific question. Note whether the target improved. This loop, record, specific question, practice, then record again and compare. It turns recording from a self-evaluation ritual into actual feedback data. You know whether what you did in practice had an effect. Now, listening back analytically rather than emotionally is a skill that takes some time to develop, and I want to be direct about that. The first several times that people tend to listen to recording of themselves, the emotional response is strong enough to get in the way, really, of the analytical one. You notice that you don't really like the sound of your playing, or you notice something you're not really proud of, and the evaluation stops there. The way to move past this is to listen with a specific target, and then to listen more than once. On the first listen, just notice the overall shape. And on the second listen, only, listen out for that only specific thing that you named before you started recording. And then on the third listen, maybe start listening to something else, often something adjacent to your target that you didn't expect to find. Over time, this actually is going to become more natural, this whole process. The emotional response to hearing your own playing decreases as the analytical response becomes more practiced. I want to say something about what then happens because it becomes a regular practice habit over time rather than just an occasional experiment. Pianists who record regularly and listen back analytically develop a more accurate internal model of their own playing. The gap between how they believe they sound and how they actually sound narrows over time because the feedback loop is continuous. They also tend to develop better auditory standards. The recordings hold them accountable to a level of quality that they might otherwise let slide. This is especially valuable for adult pianists who work primarily without a teacher or who see a teacher maybe sometimes, but not really that frequently. It's really the best substitute there is for having another set of ears in the room. So start today with one passage, one question, and 5 minutes. Just your phone, that's it. And if you want to go deeper, if you want to know not just how to record, but exactly what to listen out for, and also maybe what questions to ask, and how to turn what you hear into a real practice plan. That's what I do with students one on one. If you're a serious adult pianist and you're ready to close that gap faster, the link to book a free intro call is in the description. I'd love to hear where you're at. And if you're not there yet, that's fine. Subscribe here. And there's a lot more where this came from.